thank you for your energy, your concern, your deep following of all of this. And it's been a long and very, very fruitful hour that PAIR has opened us up to many possibilities of becoming empowered and sharing that power and collaborating with each other. I'd just like to let you know that I'm 85, and that brings a lot of responsibilities because I really have no excuses to sit down and do nothing at all, really. And so I supersede in time the history of this timeline, and I'm just going to go back suddenly, this is a sudden thought, and read to you a letter from General Douglas MacArthur. Anybody remember General Douglas MacArthur? Do you? Could you? Okay. He was big in my youth. You know, I was born in 1930, and in 1940, 45, we were engaged in trying to do our little bit for what was happening in Europe that you were much closer to. But General Douglas MacArthur had charge of the Pacific, I believe, and I hope I'm correct on that. He's my, yeah. Okay, so this is a letter from General Douglas MacArthur that my uncle, Walter, received in 1961. He didn't get, it wasn't written to him. A professor wrote it to him and sent it to him because it had been sent to this professor. My uncle happened to have been in Nagasaki 6 weeks after the bomb as a young Marine lieutenant. So that was back in August of 1945, right? No, he didn't get there till September. And he stayed for over 4 months doing nothing. There was nothing to do. His sergeant took over and just said, look, you just take this Jeep and go off. Do what you want to do. We can handle things. There was so little to handle. Anyway, this letter is a bit revealing. And perhaps it describes why we have to wait 70 years why we have to continue 70 years of resistance to what happened on the 6th and 9th of August in 1945, okay? Dear Professor Shermer, I have received your letter of March 15th and read it with deep interest. My records are not immediately available to me, and consequently, I will reply to your queries in general terms. Japan realized defeat was inevitable as early as September 1944, when we initiated the recapture and liberation of the Philippines. We have somebody here who worked in the Philippines for a while. Who's that? Thank you. Yes, I met her this afternoon. A budding journalist from Sweden. So Japan realized this. This enabled us to interdict I guess it is, by sea and air, her essential supplies. Am I speaking too fast? Or is this audible to everybody? Okay, thank you. Okay. From the south of oil, rubber, nickel, tin, and other war materials. This blockade, together with her air vulnerability, made her, Japan, ultimate destruction a certainty. When was this? September 1944, he's describing. Japan was practically defeated already by September 1944. This is not in our history books, is it? Is this new? To how many of you is this new? Hi, let's see a show of hands. How many were aware of this? Thank you. Thank you. Okay. This blockade, okay, right, together with her air vulnerability, made her ultimate destruction a certainty. She was anxious for peace, and the Pacific War should have ended several months before it did. In my opinion, there was a monumental failure of statescraft on the part of the Allies in not consummating this end. My own professional views, this is General Douglas MacArthur, as to the weakness of the enemy were well known. Through my operational and intelligence divisions, colloquially known as G3 and G2, I made daily reports to the Army Chief of Staff. I was not consulted about the use of the atom bomb. You remember who this is? The commander of the forces that were still having to fight in 1944 into 1945 was not consulted about the use of the bomb. Had I been, I would have expressed the view that it was unnecessary, that Japan was already prepared to surrender. I trust this gives you the information you requested. Most sincerely, Douglas MacArthur. And that's sent to a civil engineering department at the University of Applied Science, College of Applied Science, Ohio University in Athens, Ohio. Just thought it would be interesting how much history we really know. You know? So now I'm just going to sit down and just read through and stop at a certain point. So you don't mind if I do that. It'll make it easier for you to have questions, and we won't get diverted on small details that I feel are important but would not be possible in this length of time that we have. Okay. It happens to be a letter I composed from the detention center. How many are familiar? I go asking a question again. How many know about the fact that we did do a Plowshares action in 2012 at one of the nuclear facilities in the United States in the summer? So it's new. Okay, great. Okay. So we will have a chance to tell you how one's done. Another one in more recent times than you heard a great explanation of in this last hour. This is a letter I wrote from in 2014 dear to everybody, or I was trying to write one letter to all the letters that you had to be answering because people from all over the world did write to us. We send warm greetings and many thanks to all who actively engaged in the transformation of weapons of mass destruction to sustainable, life-giving alternatives. Gregory Borgiobed, who was, at that time was in U.S. federal prison, Leavenworth, and Michael Wally at a federal facility in Bradford, Pennsylvania, and I are sending you some of our observations and concerns on the second anniversary of our Transform Now Plowshares. On July 28, 2012, after thorough study of nuclear issues, and because of our deepening commitment to nonviolence, we engaged in direct action by cutting through 4 fences at the Y-12 National Security Complex in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where the U.S. continues to furbish and produce thermonuclear warheads. That facility was built in 1943. They started building. Oak Ridge is a town in Tennessee between 2 ridges. So they named the town Oak Ridge. It wasn't even a known facility. Thank you. So it continues till this day to operate. And this is why we have Plowshares actions as direct action. And it's why so many people like yourselves are engaged in organizations constantly trying to say, this is insane. And let's just do common sense, right? Common sense is all we need to protect the common good, which is the work of every law, to protect the common good. And if we're not fostering the common good, or if something is not promoting the common good, it is not a law. It is not to be followed, as Martin Luther King said over and over again. Okay. So we reached the building where it started in 1943. We reached it 3.5 years ago today, roughly, where all U.S. highly enriched bomb-grade uranium is stored. We've heard a lot about the highly enriched uranium that Iran might be producing, right? All of it is stored there, and actually 10,000 nuclear bombs, enough fuel. And that's just in a small object about like the size of a softball, full of this highly enriched uranium, which becomes the trigger for every thermonuclear explosion, which is a second nuclear detonation. But it started off, it's triggered by the highly enriched uranium. And anyway, this is still continuing until today. In the second facility, I think, that was built, I believe the building we now have is the second one. They did reconstruct one. Now, my details on that might not be totally accurate, but they're trying to build another one for more billions. Okay. I should say trillions, really, literally. So on that day, 2 years ago, when we reached the building, after cutting through 3 illegal criminal fences, because they are not for the common good, where all the highly enriched uranium is stored, we prayed and we also wrote messages on the wall of this building, which is very cheap building. It might be twice as long as the size of this wall and about as high, it seems to me. Cement block, very inexpensively painted white, no windows. At the end of each corner has a rectangle sticking out. And at the top, there's supposed to be people up there in the tower noticing what's happening, okay? So, one of the things we wrote very quickly, we got there, let's say, it took 15 minutes to cut through those 3 fences, if that. So it's like 4:45 in the morning. So it's bright as day because the whole place is totally lit up, although it's still nighttime. We've come over the 2 ridges, and it took about 2 hours to do it because we were going through heavy, thick woods. 3 of us, okay? So okay. Now we acted humbly as creative extremists for love, to cite a phrase coined by Martin Luther King. And we wished also to emphasize that after a nuclear holocaust, there's not a sliver of a chance for apology or remorse. There are a number of reasons we did what we did. We were acutely mindful of the widespread loss to humanity that nuclear systems have already caused. And we realize that all life on Earth could be exterminated through intentional, accidental, technical, or human error. Our action at what is called the Y-12, secretly again, the Y-12 site in Oak Ridge, exposed the storage of weapons-making materials deliberately hidden from the general public. Most people don't even know about Oak Ridge anymore. You know, that was one of the first 3 places built in order to construct those first 2 bombs, and never stopped ever since. The production, refurbishment, threat, or use of weapons of mass destruction violate the fundamental rules and principles by which we all try to live amicably as human beings. And our Constitution, the US Constitution, and the laws of war, which are international agreements, are intended to ensure the survival of humanity with dignity. However, it is abundantly clear that the harmony and cooperation among nations can never be achieved with nuclear weapons. These arguments, we assume, will be made on our behalf during the eventual appeal of our convictions that accused us of sabotage, though it was never our intention to harm our country. And at this point, we'll read to you the statements that we were able to make as we read them. Maybe we could stand up. Yeah. We had finished about 10 minutes of labeling the building with things like Transform Now and Woe to a Country in Blood, something. It just came to whatever came to us, we wrote with spray paint on this beautiful white wall over here. And we also had brought with us baby bottles, two each, of human blood of people who asked when a Plowshares action would be happening if they would use their blood, so it had been stored. One of the people had already gone into eternity. Another was a woman unable to do it because she was helping to care for a parent. And the third was one who had done a previous Plowshares action in the action that we just, the previous action to ours, which was in 2009, November, called Disarm Now Plowshares. I happened to be present at the trial, all the days of the trial of that. So that really sparked off our idea we must do another Plowshares action when the jury and the judge just totally did not listen to their hearts and their consciences, and they were given time in prison. The previous group in 2009, Disarmed Now. There were 5 of them. I heard referring to Sister Anne Montgomery. She was 84 at that time when she did that action, and she had done the very first action in 1980. Mm-hmm. So she stuck at it and had done 2 or 3 or 4 more in between. And one priest, I think he was 86 Bix at the time. I'm not sure. I could be wrong. Might be 82. Anyway, 2 octogenarians, 2 grandmothers in their 60s still, and 1 Jesuit priest who had done about 4 actions. His name is Steve Kelly. Okay, so this is what we did when we saw the security guard drive slowly into the area that we had entered in order to label the building with symbols that would speak to anybody to tell the truth about what was really happening in this facility. You understand? It was a quick message we were trying to deliver as fast as we could, and we had also symbolically and really begun the work of transformation by taking our hammers that were in our backpacks and just reverently, reflectively began the work, transform this place into something which is life-enhancing. And there was a line to show that we had begun the dismantling or changing of that facility into something that would be life enhancing rather than dead end. So we then lit candles, symbolic of light we were trying to bring to these people. And the security guard drove slowly along the building, not along the road, but inside, because by that time, it was like 10 or 15 minutes later, they realized something was happening there. So they said the security guard back. So we stood there with three of me, where Paul is, myself, and this other person with candles. And we began this statement. I gave you one? Yes. Okay. We'll do it exactly as we did it, okay? This is the message to that first security guard. All together on this, okay? Come, let us go up to the mountain of God, where God, the place where God lives, that God may teach us God's ways, and that we may walk in God's paths. For God will bring justice among the nations, and bring peace among many peoples. They will hammer their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not lift up swords against nations. No longer will they learn to make war. Come, let us walk in the light of God. From Isaiah chapter 2.
Brothers and sisters, powers that be, we come to you today as friends in love. We, like many of you, are people of faith, inspired by many who have gone before us, people like the prophets Isaiah, Micah, Jesus, as well as Gandhi, and the countless who call us to beat swords into plowshares. May we now transform weapons into real, life-giving alternatives to build true peace.
We come to the Y12 facility because our very humanity rejects the designs of nuclearism, empire, and war. Our faith in love and nonviolence encourages us to believe that our activity here is necessary, that we come to invite transformation, undo the past and present work of Y12, disarm and end any further efforts to increase the Y12 capacity for an economy and social structure based upon war-making and empire building.
A loving and compassionate Creator invites us to take the urgent and decisive steps to transform the U.S. empire and this facility into life-giving alternatives which resolve real problems of poverty and environmental degradation for all.
We begin together by preparing our minds and hearts for this transformation. And so we bring gifts to symbolize this transformation. Instruments that serve life, peace and harmony, truth and healing to this nuclear weapons plant and everywhere. We bring our life symbols.
Blood for the healing and pouring out our lives in service and in love. Our very humanity depends on lives given, not taken. But blood also reminds us of the horrific spilling of blood by nuclear weapons.
Our hammers to begin the transforming work of deconstructing war machines, creating new jobs which address real problems, eliminate poverty, heal and foster the fullness of life for all.
We bring our truth symbols, candles, for light transforms fear and secrecy into authentic security.
Flowers, the white rose of forgiveness, acceptance of friendship, and genuine reconciliation.
Crime tape and an indictment which points out truth and ends lies which have blinded and dulled the very conscience of nations and serve the interests of justice, for the healing of global relationships.
A Bible to remind ourselves to become sources of wisdom and to inspire our acts of conscience as we carry on.
Lastly, we bring food, symbolized by this bread, strengthening us as we build this new world where people do not feel compelled to use their weapons in order to feed their families. So may we break and share this bread together in joy and genuine friendship as we work together, empowered by our Creator God.
To transform now. And with that, we offered the bread to our friend, this officer. Only one officer was still there at that time. And we had many copies and envelopes, and we also had, we can sit down now, I think.
Okay.
We also had a list of the laws that were being indicted, that were being broken, shall we say, by this facility. We had one whole page of the names of, starting with the U.S. Constitution, Article 6, which says all international agreements and principles and laws. I see somebody knowing Article 6. Thank you. Can you tell us, sir?
No, actually, no.
But you agree.
Yes,
Thank you.
exactly.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that we are, the United States from the beginning expressed that its laws are superseded by international laws. So that was about that, okay? Where are we now? So we got a chance to say the whole thing. And then by the time we were finished reading this and we had the things there to give, it was in a pile, kind of. We began to see a second car, white vans, they all were, a third, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, a seventh, and the first one that was that security officer who listened to everything. And he had a cell phone, and we could hear him say, "They are peacemakers. They're peace protesters. You better send some more people." We could hear him say that. And then we were able to say that whole statement, and he listened. And he just didn't accept our offers of flowers and bread. But by then the next time, the two that popped out had all that they needed with their big guns, and they came over to us, and from then on, this is now maybe 10 after 5. 10 after 5 in the morning, they'd done all that we did. Anyway, they handcuffed us, I think at the back, if I'm not mistaken, and then our feet, and and made us to lie down, and we couldn't talk to each other. So from then on, we listened and just, and every 20 minutes or so, they'd help us up to stand, and then, because they didn't know what they were going to do with us. This is a Saturday morning. Okay, so that's practically the end of it. Okay, so if you want me to finish this letter, shall I finish the letter? You have the idea of what happened. In about, let's say, 7 to 15 minutes is all we were there for, okay? We took action. I could read this. We three Transform Now Plowshares consider it our duty, right, and privilege to heighten tension in the ongoing debate of disarmament versus deterrence, because history has repeatedly taught us that the policy of deterrence doesn't lead to security, but rather to the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. During our trial, that was the next May, this is now August, the trial took place in May of 2013. All that time waiting, but we were free at that time. Okay. So during our trial, the U.S. prosecutors and the U.S. courts accused the wrong people when they claimed that we had violated the law, when what we did was make American citizens aware of egregious preparations for mass murder. We took action because we were acutely aware that our government has failed to keep its long-standing promise to pursue nuclear disarmament. The U.S. entered into the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty as Ramsey Clark, former Attorney General to President Kennedy in 1963, and still coming as a lawyer to give our testimony about the legality of civil obedience. And he had done it at our trial too, and he's about 86 now, is he? Or?
He was 84 when he testified, so you're talking about, 86 last year.
Okay.
He's outrunning you.
He preceded me. I didn't realize we were so close in age. Okay, so the U.S. Entered into the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, as Ramsey Clark testified during one of our pre-trial hearings, because in 1960s, our country was finally facing up to the severe human and environmental consequences of the U.S. bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, as well as to the hideous results of countless nuclear tests conducted by the government within and beyond our own borders. And do you know that 1,000 plus nuclear bombs have been detonated, not just simulated, detonated, exploded in 50 years on the sacred desert lands of Nevada? Do you know that? 1,000. Can you imagine the fallout of 1,000 Hiroshimas? It happened. This is how, okay. One of our pressing concerns is that U.S. prosecutors and U.S. courts adhere to an obsolete view of security with no cognizance or consciousness of the horrific effects caused by the nuclear weapons. Greg, Mike, and I believe that, undeniably, the U.S. is in a state of denial. It's, most people, actually, are what Hannah Arendt called not evil, but the banality of evil. There's nothing deep about it. It's nothing demonic. There's simply the reluctance ever to imagine what the other person is experiencing, right? And that comes in her last interview and other conversations. A book written in 2013 was about the Eichmann and the outrageously stupid of the end of World War II. We citizens cannot permit ourselves to be rendered passive and mute by the banality of evil. Only complete nuclear disarmament can save humanity. At stake is the honor and dignity of the Hibakusha, those who are still surviving the nuclear weapons use in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Along with the physical, environmental, emotional, psychological trauma long suffered by victims of the nuclear system, from uranium miners to downwinders. Is that a new expression for you? The downwinders are the people who lived in Nevada and Utah and probably California and New Mexico, suffering from the fallout of the 1,000 nuclear bombs that were tested, used either above ground, which was 100, and that until they were banned in 1963 by President Kennedy. That was one thing he did. After 1963, there were no above ground tests. From 63 on till 93, 30 years, almost every 6 weeks or so, a nuclear bomb was detonated underground by digging holes in the ground incredibly deep and at incredible expense, as you can imagine. Just testing when they knew that the first one on the 16th of July, 1945, in another desert of New Mexico, the Alamogordo Desert, that it worked. J. Robert Oppenheimer saw it working, and everybody knew it was going to be successful. And many of those scientists, including J. Robert Oppenheimer, many who had escaped from Germany, perhaps even had been involved in the in the German explorations or investigations to try to create a nuclear bomb. And certainly Einstein is one of those, came over and helped, to create this thing. But they said from then on, it should never be repeated, ever again. And they were not told either. J. Robert Oppenheimer was told it would be dropped in the Pacific, just as a sign to the Japanese. But remember, this is now July of 1945, and remember what General MacArthur said from September 44, and they're still testing them. But actually, we don't have any more underground physical bombs being tested since 1993, but they're ready to do it at any point. And they can do it all by simulation computer now, as you would know. Okay, so 2 years ago, as we neared the building in Oak Ridge, we were extremely surprised by the ineffectiveness of the system that supposedly guarded our nation's most important, nuclear complex. We believed that we were about to expose the source of unfettered violence that has led to chronic spiritual economic decline in the United States. As it turned out, it was the laxity of the security system at Y-12 that caught the attention of the courts and mainstream media. Security weakness became a big story. That's a diversion. There was no mainstream acknowledgement that the national security complex is rotting by its own irrelevance, but it's also rotting by its own evil. Most surprisingly, our July 2012 action and our court cases have revealed that it is not the US government that is in control of the nuclear weapons complex, but in reality, it is the corporations that are in control through their solicitation and manipulation of endless funding for the refurbishment of the unlawful thermonuclear weapons. And with that, I'll just say that J. Robert Oppenheimer, who is the man who led the project, and did it successfully, but regretted it for the rest. And once he saw that thing, he had said that it will become another gold rush. That's what it is. Thank you. Wow. We still have 10 minutes. Yes. Thank you. You see how we share power in this team?
So with
and the mic is not working, so I have to send it to you.
Okay. Everybody can hear well enough? Great. So we got to figure that we might know a little something from the experience that's been sketched that we've been through. We also presume that there's a lot of collective intelligence in the room. So can any of you who have something to add to the conversation, the discussion, or questions to ask about things, go ahead and put your hand up high so we can see it, and then we'll hear what you have to say and see who needs to respond. So don't be shy, speak up, hands high.
Yeah, I see some people budding, so let's give them a moment to think, or discuss even, have a little chat.
Anyone?
You want to tell your neighbor what you want to say? Brother.
Yeah, I was just wondering about this fallout we were talking about in the area of Nevada, in the desert of Nevada. From time to time I follow American news media, and I should say that I barely hear stuff like that going on, and like perhaps test bombs going off in the desert of Nevada. Usually you find these stuff more often on the internet specifically, but I was wondering...
On what? I missed that.
On the internet. And I was wondering actually, because you said like this fallout from all these bombs are actually causing like actual damage to people are living in the area. I was wondering how people deal with it nowadays. Do people also protest or do something about all of this
Oh,
fraud?
then we've been having lots of protests, you know, for 50 years, yeah. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I said that actually we're not having any more testing is going, not now, it's not happening. But that doesn't mean simulated testing is going on. The evil is happening in these facilities where they continue to make the bombs. But they're not doing any more since 1993. That was ended. Although, who knows, there may have been there, but there's a big movement of people in Las Vegas who monitor and report, and there's lots and lots of information available. And we have one movement called the Nevada Desert Experience. It goes back to 1980, begun by the Franciscans in the spirit of St. Francis, who loved the planet Earth, and they bring people and hold events very regularly. Per gave us the term, it's the pulse effect that has never stopped drumming its beat, at least since about 1980 and 83, but there were others before that, and the Quakers were the first people in the early 50s who made witness and stayed there. There's been a constant presence, as there's a constant presence at your Trident submarine base in Fastlane, constant, you know, a camp living there, never stopped. The oldest peace camp in the world is that living one. We just had the privilege of visiting them last week in Fastlane, Scotland. So they're just witnessing in front of the Trident submarine, which 4 of them actually, which have thermonuclear weapons on them. But does that say something to you? It's a huge movement, yeah. Yes?
Yeah, my name is Julia. I wonder, as I understood it, you were a bit disappointed in how media in the US had been covering your activism or this direct action. Do you think, is that true? Or is that the way that I understood it? That you were a bit disappointed about how media had been talking about it afterwards? And I also wonder if you afterwards have been thinking about how you could make the media talk about the actions of the plowshares in another way?
Yeah, well, let me explain a little bit. Yes?
5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay, thank you. So, when these folks were on trial and subsequently when they were in jail, several of us in the support group spent a lot of time fielding media inquiries. And we came to the realization shortly into that support effort that the conventional press was typically focusing on 2 things. Wow, there's a national security failure because these 3 old people got into the place. And number 2, there's an outrageous 82-year-old nun who got into this place. That's all they wanted to dwell on. And so we made it really a point to stop them short and try and correct the story repeatedly, saying, listen, there's not one 82-year-old nun, there are 3 peace activists who did this disarmament action, and the point isn't to show the shortcomings of the security at Y-12, the point is to show how the nuclear arsenal that we continue to modernize and plan to run for another 70 years to match the 70 we've just come through, constitutes the security threat to the planet. That's the reality that's going on forever, sucking up trillions of dollars, attempting to burn down the planet and extinguish the human family. And that's completely irrational and irresponsible conduct, not to mention criminal. And so we had to continue to push that message back at this media hype. And it's gotten better. We've gotten some really wonderful coverage in the United States, one of the very best treatments of this action and its meaning and what it's attempting to say came from a reporter from the Washington Post named Dan Zak.
Z-A-K, Z-A-K.
Z-A-K, right. And he will have a book forthcoming later this year, in just a couple months we hope. And then we saw an extensive treatment in Der Spiegel, German magazine as well, that wasn't too bad, although I don't read German, so I couldn't tell you definitively. You know, I know we're short on time, and if you might not believe this, but we could go all night if we wanted to, talking about this stuff. I do want to mention a couple of things. We have put up over here a few resources that you can consult, including the Transform Now Plowshares website, each of our email addresses, if you want to keep dialoguing with us. My organization that I work for, Nonviolence International, which has been underwriting this European tour and providing some of the financing to pay for plane tickets at least. And then some of these resources that Megan has listed are places and organizations that stay on top of educating and raising the alarm about what's going on with the nuclear arms
They're
race in
mostly
the United
quarterlies,
States.
and they come from different parts of the country, and well worth Googling those names. Tri-Valley Cares is out of Lawrence Livermore Lab in California, one of the originating places. And then OREPA is the Oak Ridge Environmental Peace Alliance. And that they're the experts on Oak Ridge, which produces the highly enriched uranium. And then there's another one, Nuke Watch, which does the underground silos, of which there are about at least 500, and there have been several plowshares action, these silos in the middle of a farm field, ready to go off in 3 seconds to 10 minutes alert. Who's going to discern at that anywhere, you know, to go 8,000 miles away to China or to Mongolia or Europe or whatever.
I know we need to give the microphone back to the management and end the evening. I don't know how many of you want to rush home and be done with the night, and how many of you want to hang around for informal conversations, but you're welcome to as far as I'm concerned. That's being presumptuous. Thank you so much for coming out tonight and listening to both of these